My name is Melissa Dang, and I'm the Chief Technical Advisor at Bandek Foundation. Bandek Foundation is a Thai-registered foundation whose mission is to provide access to health, education, and safety services to vulnerable children in Thailand. In the past year, we served over 1,400 children with different services, including enrolling them into public schools, accessing health services at hospitals and getting vaccinations, as well as providing links to protection services. In all of this work, we really try to ensure that our workers, as well as anyone who's involved with Bandek, is doing their responsibility in protecting children. And this is why we have the Child Protection Policy against every form of violence. And this includes efforts for law reform and enforcement, promotion of appropriate attitude on violence, development and strengthening of essential services and rehabilitation, building capacity of family, community, and service providers. Basically, it's to help ensure that children are able to access their rights. A child is anyone who's under the age of 18. Unless there's a law that's specifically applicable to the child where the majority is attained earlier. Child rights are something that every child should have and should be able to do. It includes all the rights are listed in the UN Convention of the Child Rights, which is something that Bandek ascribes to. And all children have the same rights, regardless of any of their status. It does not depend on their gender, their religion, their orientation, anything like that. Every child has the same rights. So children's rights have always existed. However, it's been codified into the International Child Rights Convention, which Thailand ratified in 1992. So in that law, it stated that the government will take all appropriate action to protect children from all forms of violence. And it also states that they also take protective measures, including making sure that there's ways to identify child abuse, that there's ways of reporting it, and referring to appropriate systems of support for children. So Bandek, as a Thai foundation, is responsible for ensuring children's protection, and that includes the duty to protect and also to advocate for child rights. So as social workers, teachers, any of Bandek staff, we all need to do our part to raise awareness and the knowledge of child rights. So when we develop relationships of trust with beneficiaries, including children or parents, we talk about confidentiality. This allows us to do a more thorough assessment of what the needs are in the family, and also allows us to have a safe and trusting relationship. So as part of our duty in advocating for child rights and teaching about child rights is that it helps them to better protect themselves and also know what their rights are. So you can think about our CPP protocol and even the development sort of like the house, which is Bandek, right? The house for children. So the first and foundational step of the house of building Bandek's child protection policy is the general knowledge of child protection and rights. That's the first foundational layer that everyone here should know about child protection and child rights. The second is having a management team that's aware and committed to child protection and rights, which means making sure there's enough resources to make it happen, all the way from HR and questioning and interviewing staff, making sure there's a criminal record check, making sure that when staff are joining Bandek that they're trained on child protection, and making sure there's enough connections to support ongoing learning of child rights and making sure it continues to happen throughout our work here. The third part is the CPP itself, which is a physical document stating and detailing Bandek's policy and commitment to child protection. The fourth part is enforcing CPP through practice and ways of implementing it. So in all of our programs, we want to make sure that child protection happens. After enforcing it and implementing it in all of our services and programs, we want to monitor and evaluate to see that it's actually happening and how effectively it's happening. So this includes things like making sure that there's a criminal background check, that there's job postings that talk about child rights. In the interview process, we're also talking about child rights. Okay, and all of this together helps to make Bandek a child-safe environment. Actually, it can be really anyone. There's many ways that people can intentionally or unintentionally hurt a child. Often when we think of child abuse, we think of people who are very predatory and maybe evil and really out there to get children. And in some circumstances, this might be the case, where there's intentional ways of mistreating children. On the other hand, there's a lot of people who don't set out to abuse or hurt children and end up doing so anyway. This could be due to lack of knowledge on child rights, on child development. It could be not knowing how to respond to children in various different situations. And so that's part of our work, to support knowledge and to support training and education about child rights. One of the ways that children are hurt is through their own behavior. And that may be due to a lot of different factors. And this includes things like using drugs to a harmful amount, having suicidal thoughts that they begin to act out on, finding other ways that hurt their health, hurt their body, and having very negative self-talk, for example, hurts their self-esteem as well. Another form of child abuse is through other children, which is peer violence. This includes things like bullying, discrimination, physical and sexual violence, gangs. Another group includes adults. Adults can also hurt children, even things like domestic violence, children witnessing domestic violence, if there's sexual abuse, psychological abuse, neglect, exploitation. And on a broader scale, even societies and their messages that they provide to children can be abusive towards children. Societal abuse can include abuse from different organizations, such as schools who use corporal punishment, who really support discrimination, even organizations that profess to do good, such as nonprofits, foundations, NGOs. Without proper understanding of child rights, it can easily happen that good intentions end up with a negative impact on children. So child abuse is doing something or failing to do something that results in harm to the child or puts a child at risk of harm. And this includes ignoring or not providing for a child's need. These are also forms of abuse. Different types of child abuse include physical, sexual, emotional or mental and psychological, neglect, exploitation, and cyber and social bullying. So what does physical abuse cover? Physical abuse means making wounds on a child's body. It includes physical use of force against a child, which results in physical injury or suffering. Things like hitting, kicking, punching, shaking, strangling, burning, poisoning, really harsh corporal punishment, torture, and more. It has an impact of destroying trust between an adult and a child, and sometimes their sense of love and their sense of value. So in Thailand, the law is against corporal punishment in all forms. So mental psychological violence is kind of making wounds in the child's heart. It includes things like humiliating a child, controlling their behavior, withholding information, threatening isolation, preventing the child from accessing transportation or communication, engaging them in illegal activities as well, using a mother or relative to mentally force or coerce a child to do something or to accept abuse, denying a child access to basic needs, and it's also making them a witness of domestic violence and abuse. So sexual abuse injures a child's dignity. It includes non-consensual or forced physical sexual behavior, which includes rape or assault, things like unwanted touching, sexual kissing, voyeurism, exhibitionism, exposing a child to pornography, saying sexually suggestive statements towards a child, the use of position of trust to obtain unwanted sexual activity, incest, and sexual harassment. Neglect is making a child feel alone in their heart. So neglect can be deliberate or through negligence and carelessness. Or the inability, it's basically an inability to provide or secure safety of a child and their rights to physical safety and psychological development. Neglect can be a passive kind of form of abuse. Some vulnerable families can be manipulated by organizations, convincing them that the child will grow better separated from their parents. In some of these cases, the child is a victim of neglectful care.